Most people go through life believing their struggles are interruptions. Interruptions to happiness, interruptions to success, interruptions to the life they think they are supposed to be living. But what if that assumption is the very thing keeping them trapped? What if every setback, every delay, every moment of resistance is not an obstacle to life, but the raw material of it? Right now, as you're listening, your mind is already searching for relevance. You are silently asking yourself whether this applies to you, whether this is another motivational idea that feels good for a moment and disappears by tomorrow. That skepticism is healthy. The Stoics encouraged it, because Stoicism was never meant to inspire you. It was meant to prepare you. Prepare you for pressure. Prepare you for uncertainty. Prepare you for a world that does not bend to preference, desire, or comfort. And here is the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. Life is not designed to be fair. It is designed to be revealing. The ancient Stoics understood this deeply, not as theorists detached from reality, but as men who lived through war, exile, political betrayal, imprisonment, illness, and constant uncertainty. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire under relentless crisis. Seneca lived under the paranoia of tyranny. Epictetus was born enslaved and crippled for life. None of them waited for ideal conditions to begin living well. They trained their minds to function regardless of conditions. And that is why their ideas still matter today. Not because they promise comfort, but because they offer stability in a world that constantly destabilizes. If you feel like you are pushing forward while everything pushes back, this philosophy was built for you. Stoicism begins with a single radical distinction. There are things you control, and there are things you do not. Everything that exhausts you unnecessarily comes from confusing the two. Epictetus was explicit about this. In the opening lines of the Enchiridion, he draws a boundary that reshapes the entire human experience. Your opinions, judgments, desires, and actions belong to you. Your reputation, outcomes, other people, and external events do not. Most anxiety is born when people invest emotional energy where they have no authority. They try to control perception. They try to control outcomes. They try to control how others respond. The Stoic does not waste strength this way. Instead, he becomes disciplined where discipline actually works. This is not passive acceptance. It is strategic focus. And this leads us to the first Stoic principle: question your limits. Most limits are inherited, not examined. They come from childhood conditioning, cultural expectation, past failure, or fear disguised as realism. Marcus Aurelius warned himself repeatedly not to confuse habit with truth. Just because something has always been done a certain way does not mean it must continue that way. The Stoic question is not, can I? It is, why not? Why not attempt the difficult conversation? Why not take responsibility rather than wait for permission? Why not aim higher than what feels comfortable? This is not recklessness. Stoicism rejects impulsive ambition, but it also rejects resignation. The Stoic understands that excellence is not accidental, it is chosen. When you avoid challenging yourself, you are not preserving peace, you are preserving fear. Fear thrives on avoidance. Growth suffocates it. The Stoics did not believe in motivation. They believed in duty to one's potential. To waste your capacity was, in their view, a quiet form of injustice, not toward society, toward yourself. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Most people do not fail because the challenge was impossible. They fail because they never fully engaged. Asking, "Why not?" is not about ego. It is about honesty. If you are capable of more, pretending otherwise corrodes self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of resilience. The second principle follows naturally. Be obsessed with getting better. Not perfect, better. The Stoics had a word for this, prokopton. It meant one who is making progress. Progress mattered more than outcome. You were judged not by where you stood, but by the direction you were moving. This mindset is radically different from modern performance culture, which obsesses over results while neglecting character. Stoicism flips that equation. Character creates results. Results do not create character. If you improve your judgment, discipline, and emotional regulation, external success becomes more likely, but also less controlling. You stop being dependent on it for identity. This is psychological freedom. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that improvement is quiet. It happens in private decisions no one applauds. Choosing restraint when indulgence is available. Choosing honesty when deception is easier. Choosing effort when distraction is tempting. These moments do not trend online. They shape destiny. The Stoic does not wait for motivation. He builds systems of conduct, daily reflection, voluntary discomfort, intentional self-examination, not to punish the self, but to strengthen it. Self-mastery was not viewed as restriction. It was viewed as liberation from impulse. The third principle deepens this commitment. Pour your heart into what you do, not because success is guaranteed, but because effort is yours to give fully. The Stoics made a critical distinction between effort and detachment. You give total effort. You release obsession with outcome. This is one of the hardest disciplines to internalize. Most people do the opposite. They half commit, while emotionally clinging to results. This creates anxiety and mediocrity simultaneously. Epictetus warned that when you tie your peace to outcomes, you hand your stability to chance. The Stoic pours himself into action, not into expectation. Work becomes meaningful because it is done with integrity, not because it guarantees reward. This approach changes how pressure feels. Pressure no longer threatens identity. It becomes a test of preparation. When you know you gave everything within your control, regret loses its power. You may still fail, but you fail cleanly, and that matters, because self-betrayal hurts more than loss. The fourth principle is restraint in motion. Stay on your path. Distraction is not accidental. It is engineered. The modern world rewards reaction, outrage, comparison, and constant stimulation. The Stoics would recognize this immediately. They warned that a scattered mind is a vulnerable mind. When you chase everything, you stand for nothing. Staying on your path does not mean rigidity. It means alignment. Your actions reflect your values, not external noise. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if something is not necessary, not truthful, and not aligned with virtue, it does not deserve your attention. Attention is finite. Where you place it determines who you become. Most people outsource their attention unconsciously. The Stoic guards it deliberately. He chooses depth over novelty, consistency over excitement. This discipline creates momentum that distraction cannot replicate. And then comes the principle most people resist. Do not focus on outcomes. This does not mean you abandon goals. It means you redefine success. Success becomes acting well, not being rewarded. This is difficult for achievement-driven cultures to accept, but it is precisely why Stoicism produces psychological resilience. When outcomes disappoint, the Stoic is not destroyed, because his worth was never invested there. Seneca wrote that a wise person is neither raised up by success nor cast down by failure. Both are external. Character is internal. When you focus on what you control, effort, judgment, values, anxiety loses leverage. You are no longer negotiating with fate. You are cooperating with reality. This is not weakness. It is maturity. Most people spend their lives trying to manipulate the uncontrollable. The Stoic invests where return is guaranteed, within. This is only the beginning. In the next part, we will go deeper into Stoic identity, emotional discipline, power dynamics, and why inner authority matters more than external status in the long run. At some point, every serious person confronts the same realization. External success does not automatically produce internal stability. You can achieve what you once wanted and still feel exposed, still reactive, still dependent on circumstances behaving a certain way for you to feel okay. The Stoics were not impressed by achievement alone. They saw how fragile it was. Wealth could vanish overnight. Reputation could collapse with a rumor. Power could be stripped by politics or fate. What remained when everything else was removed was character. This is why Stoicism places such relentless emphasis on identity, not identity as a label, but identity as an internal structure. Who are you when nothing is going your way? Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when approval disappears? Marcus Aurelius warned himself constantly not to confuse roles with self. You are not your job. You are not your title.
You are not the applause you receive. These are functions, circumstances, temporary assignments. When people build their identity on roles, they become brittle. A role can be taken away. A function can be replaced. Approval can shift without warning. The Stoic builds identity on something immovable. Principle. Principle does not fluctuate with trends. It does not depend on mood. It does not require permission. This internal anchor is what allows the Stoic to move through success without arrogance and failure without collapse. Seneca wrote that no one is more unhappy than the person who depends on the future for happiness. Why? Because the future is never guaranteed.
Stoicism trains you to locate dignity in the present, not pleasure, not excitement, dignity, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are acting in accordance with your values, regardless of outcome. This leads directly into how Stoicism approaches emotion. Contrary to popular misunderstanding, the Stoics did not suppress emotion. They studied it. They understood that emotions arise automatically, but behavior does not have to follow. Between stimulus and response lies judgment. That judgment determines whether an emotion becomes information or domination. Anger, for example, is often treated as strength in modern culture. The Stoics disagreed. Anger is not strength. It is loss of command. Seneca devoted an entire work to anger, calling it the most destructive of passions, because it masquerades as justice while destroying reason. Anger narrows perception. It accelerates action without clarity. It damages relationships and reputation. The Stoic response to anger is not denial, but delay. Pause creates space. Space restores judgment. Once judgment returns, anger loses its authority. The same applies to fear. Fear is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence of attachment. We fear losing what we believe defines us: status, security, control. Epictetus taught that fear diminishes as soon as you correctly identify what is actually yours. Your body can be harmed. Your reputation can be attacked. Your plans can fail. But your judgment remains free. Once this is understood, fear becomes manageable. It no longer dictates behavior. The Stoic still feels fear, but he does not obey it. This distinction is critical. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act according to reason despite fear. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the mind becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If you constantly rehearse fear, resentment, or grievance, your inner life takes that shape. Stoicism is mental hygiene. You choose what thoughts deserve repetition. This discipline extends into how the Stoic relates to others. Most interpersonal suffering does not come from cruelty. It comes from expectation. We expect others to behave as we would. We expect consistency where none was promised. We expect fairness from systems that are not designed to provide it. The Stoics regarded this as a category error. Marcus Aurelius wrote that people act according to what seems good to them, even when their judgment is flawed. Understanding this does not excuse harm. It prevents bitterness. You can set boundaries without hatred. You can walk away without resentment. You can correct without humiliation. This emotional economy preserves energy. Resentment is expensive. It consumes attention. It distorts judgment. It prolongs suffering. The Stoic does not indulge it, not because resentment is immoral, but because it is ineffective. Power in Stoicism is defined differently than in modern culture. Power is not the ability to control others. It is the ability to govern oneself. Anyone can react. Few can restrain themselves. Self-command creates authority. This is why Stoicism has influenced leaders, military strategists, judges, and statesmen for centuries, not because it teaches dominance, but because it produces composure. Composure under pressure is rare, and rare qualities command respect. Marcus Aurelius governed not by force of personality, but by consistency of character. He did not believe leadership was about asserting will. It was about fulfilling responsibility without corruption. This perspective radically alters how you view success. Success becomes stewardship. Whatever position you occupy, temporary or permanent, you are a caretaker, not an owner. This mindset prevents arrogance. Arrogance, the Stoics warned, is ignorance disguised as confidence. True confidence comes from preparation, not entitlement. Preparation is quiet. It happens before crisis, daily discipline, mental rehearsal, voluntary discomfort. The Stoics practiced voluntary hardship to reduce dependence on comfort, cold, hunger, silence, not as self-punishment, as training. If you can endure discomfort by choice, you are less controlled by it when it arrives uninvited. This practice builds psychological margin. Margin is the difference between reacting and responding. When life applies pressure, margin determines whether you fracture or adapt. The Stoics trained for adaptation. They saw life as unpredictable, not hostile. Resistance to reality creates suffering. Cooperation with reality creates effectiveness. This is why Stoicism emphasizes acceptance, not passive resignation, clear-eyed acknowledgement. What is happening is happening. Now, what is the most reasonable response? This question cuts through panic. It shifts attention from complaint to action. Stoicism does not remove pain. It removes unnecessary suffering, layered on top of pain. Most suffering is not caused by events. It is caused by interpretation. Change the interpretation, and the experience changes. This is not positive thinking. It is accurate thinking. The Stoics valued truth above comfort. Comfort without truth breeds fragility. Truth, even when uncomfortable, builds resilience. This brings us to one of Stoicism's most powerful tools, negative visualization. Seneca advised imagining loss, not to dwell in fear, but to sharpen appreciation. If you consider that what you have could be taken, you stop taking it for granted. Gratitude becomes grounded.
not sentimental, not naive. Real. When you understand impermanence, presence deepens. You listen more carefully. You argue less trivially. You waste less time. Mortality, to the Stoics, was not morbid. It was clarifying. Memento mori was a discipline of focus. You do not have unlimited time. So why postpone living well? Why delay courage? Why delay honesty? Why delay responsibility? Marcus Aurelius wrote as if each day might be his last, not to dramatize life, but to prioritize it.
What deserves my energy today? What does not? This awareness eliminates triviality. Life becomes serious, not heavy, but meaningful. Meaning to the Stoics was not discovered, it was enacted. Through service, through justice, through excellence of character. You do not need to find your purpose. You need to fulfill your role well. This perspective dissolves existential paralysis. You stop asking abstract questions and start acting concretely. What is required of me now? This question anchors action, and action, repeated, shapes identity. In the next part, we will examine how Stoicism approaches ambition, failure, discipline, time, and the construction of a life that remains coherent, even when circumstances collapse. At some stage, ambition stops feeling like fuel and starts feeling like pressure. You are still driven, still capable, still moving forward, but something shifts. Achievement no longer guarantees satisfaction. Progress no longer quiets the mind. The horizon keeps moving, and with it, the feeling that something essential is being postponed. The Stoics recognized this problem with remarkable clarity. They did not condemn ambition, they refined it. Unexamined ambition, they believed, enslaves. Examined ambition disciplines. The difference lies in what ambition is serving. Most people are ambitious for external reasons: status, recognition, security, validation. These motivations are unstable because they depend on forces outside your control. The Stoic redirects ambition inward. The question becomes not, how far can I go, but how well can I live? This does not make ambition smaller, it makes it more demanding. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person should ask of every action whether it contributes to justice, self-control, and the common good. Ambition aligned with virtue becomes constructive. Ambition aligned with ego becomes corrosive. This distinction determines how one experiences failure. For most people, failure feels personal. It attacks identity. It triggers shame. It creates hesitation. The Stoics approached failure as information. Failure reveals where preparation was insufficient, judgment was flawed, or effort was incomplete. It does not diminish worth. Epictetus was clear. If you wish to improve, you must be willing to look foolish at first. Avoiding failure
is not wisdom. Avoiding learning is. The Stoic accepts failure without dramatizing it. He does not excuse it. He does not internalize it. He studies it. This attitude preserves momentum. Momentum is not built by uninterrupted success. It is built by rapid recovery. Recovery depends on self-respect. If failure destroys your self-respect, growth stalls. If failure refines your approach, progress accelerates. The Stoics trained themselves to remain internally steady regardless of external evaluation. Praise was treated cautiously. Criticism was treated analytically. Neither was allowed to distort judgment. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that public opinion is unstable and often uninformed. Basing your identity on it guarantees instability. This insight is especially relevant in a culture driven by visibility, metrics, and comparison. The Stoic withdraws identity from metrics. He measures success by alignment with principle. This internal metric is always available. It cannot be taken away by downturns, politics, or chance. This is why Stoicism produces endurance. Endurance is not stubbornness. It is adaptability without collapse. Adaptability requires discipline. Discipline for the Stoics was not harshness. It was consistency. Doing what reason demands, especially when emotion resists. This applies most directly to time. Time, Seneca warned, is the one resource people guard least carefully and regret most deeply. Most people act as though time is abundant. They postpone courage. They delay difficult conversations. They defer meaningful work. The Stoic treats time as finite and non-renewable, not with anxiety, with precision. What deserves my attention today? What does not? This question simplifies life dramatically. Trivial concerns lose priority. Essential actions move forward. Busyness decreases. Focus increases. The Stoics believe that a scattered life is a shallow one. Depth requires commitment. Commitment requires saying no. This is not withdrawal from opportunity. It is selection. When you choose deliberately, you gain leverage. When you react constantly, you lose agency. Agency is the Stoics' highest value. Without agency, virtue cannot be practiced. This brings us to discipline of desire. Most people suffer not because they lack, but because they want indiscriminately. They desire what is fashionable. They desire what is admired. They desire what others appear to enjoy. The Stoics viewed this as mental disorder. Desire must be educated. You do not remove desire, you refine it. Desire aligned with reason produces contentment. Desire aligned with comparison produces dissatisfaction. Seneca wrote that it is not the person who has little who is poor, but the person who desires more. This is not anti-ambition, it is anti-compulsion. Compulsion erodes freedom. The Stoic seeks sufficiency, not excess. Enough resources to live well, enough challenge to grow, enough responsibility to matter. Beyond that, accumulation becomes distraction. This discipline extends to pleasure. The Stoics did not reject pleasure, they rejected dependence on it. Pleasure is welcomed when it arrives naturally. It is not pursued at the expense of character. This balance protects against addiction, not only to substances, but to stimulation, praise, and novelty. A mind constantly seeking stimulation becomes restless. Restlessness is incompatible with depth. Depth is where meaning forms. Meaning to the Stoics was not a feeling, it was a structure. A life structured around contribution, coherence, and service to something beyond the ego. Marcus Aurelius believed each person is part of a larger whole. You may not control the whole, but you are responsible for your part. This sense of responsibility grounds life. You stop asking abstract questions about purpose. You start fulfilling concrete obligations. Care for your family. Perform your work with integrity. Act justly in small interactions. Meaning accumulates quietly. It does not announce itself. The Stoics warned against chasing meaning directly. Meaning emerges as a byproduct of right action. This is why Stoicism resists dramatic transformation narratives. It values incremental refinement. Small improvements, repeated daily, compound into strength. This compounding is invisible in the moment, but over years it becomes unmistakable. Character solidifies. Reputation follows. Inner confidence replaces external dependence. This inner confidence changes how you experience uncertainty. Uncertainty no longer feels threatening. It becomes neutral. You accept that you do not know what will happen. You focus on being prepared to respond. Preparedness replaces prediction. Prediction is unreliable. Preparedness is controllable. This mindset is profoundly stabilizing. It allows you to take risks without panic, to commit without desperation, to face difficulty without collapse. This is why Stoicism endures. It does not promise outcomes. It promises competence. Competence in judgment, competence in emotion, competence in action. A competent person is difficult to destabilize. This competence culminates in a specific form of freedom. Not freedom from responsibility, freedom from inner chaos. You stop fighting reality. You stop fighting yourself. Your energy aligns. Life feels coherent. Not easy, but intelligible. And intelligibility reduces suffering. In the final part, we will bring everything together into a single, unified conclusion, and close with an intellectually respectful psychological invitation that encourages thoughtful engagement, discussion, and continued exploration.
Eventually, every philosophy is tested by the same question. Can it hold when life stops cooperating? The Stoics never pretended that wisdom would protect you from loss, injustice, illness, or disappointment. They promised something far more demanding and far more valuable. They promised that you could remain whole, whole in judgment, whole in character, whole in dignity, even when circumstances fracture. Most people underestimate how much energy they spend fighting reality. They resist what has already happened. They resent what cannot be changed. They argue internally with facts that will not yield. This resistance does not alter outcomes. It only exhausts the mind. The Stoics understood that peace is not achieved by arranging the world to your liking. It is achieved by arranging your inner life so that it is not dependent on the world's agreement. This is the final discipline of Stoicism. Not control, alignment. Alignment between what is real and how you respond to it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the universe is change and life is opinion. This was not poetry, it was instruction. Events unfold according to forces far larger than individual preference. Your power lies not in stopping change, but in choosing how you meet it. Once this is fully understood, something fundamental shifts. You stop demanding guarantees. You stop negotiating with fate. You stop postponing inner stability until conditions improve. You begin to live now. This does not make you passive, it makes you effective. Because effectiveness requires clarity. Clarity requires acceptance. Acceptance is not approval. It is acknowledgement. This is what allows the Stoic to act decisively without illusion. When a relationship ends, the Stoic grieves but does not collapse into resentment. When a career falters, the Stoic adapts but does not surrender self-respect. When health declines, the Stoic adjusts, but does not abandon dignity. Pain is unavoidable. Disintegration is optional. The Stoics believed that most people are not destroyed by events, but by the stories they tell themselves about those events. I shouldn't be here. This shouldn't be happening. This means I am less. Stoicism dismantles these narratives. It replaces them with questions grounded in reason. What is happening? What is required of me now? What response preserves my character? These questions restore agency. Agency is the core of human dignity. Without it, people feel helpless. With it, they endure. This is why Stoicism places such emphasis on responsibility. Responsibility is not burden, it is ownership. You own your judgments. You own your choices. You own your response. Everything else is contingent. When people avoid responsibility, they also avoid power. They become reactive. They wait. They resent. The Stoic does the opposite. He claims responsibility where it is legitimate and releases concern where it is not. This division is liberating. You stop carrying what was never yours.
You stop blaming what cannot be blamed. You focus. Focus simplifies life. The Stoics did not live small lives, they lived focused ones. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire. Seneca navigated immense wealth and political danger. Epictetus taught students who would shape future leaders. None of them lived without pressure. They lived without confusion. Confusion is what drains energy. Confusion about values. Confusion about priorities. Confusion about what matters. Stoicism clarifies. What matters is virtue. Not virtue, rhetorical virtue, practical virtue. Justice in decision-making. Courage in uncertainty. Temperance in desire. Wisdom in judgment. These are not abstractions. They are daily disciplines. When you act justly, you reduce internal conflict. When you act courageously, fear loses leverage. When you practice temperance, desire stops ruling you. When you think clearly, chaos loses its power. This is the architecture of inner freedom. Freedom not from obligation, but from disorder.
Disorder is expensive. It wastes attention. It fractures identity. It multiplies suffering. Order restores efficiency of mind. An ordered mind is calm. A calm mind is precise. Precision allows excellence. Excellence, to the Stoics, was never about comparison. Comparison corrodes contentment. Excellence was about fulfillment of function, doing what you are meant to do well, whether that role is visible or unnoticed, whether it is praised or ignored. This perspective eliminates envy. Why envy another person's path when you are responsible for your own? The Stoic does not compete for identity. He competes only with his previous self. This inward competition produces steady growth, growth that is not flashy, but durable. Durability is the true advantage in a volatile world. Markets shift, institutions change, technologies disrupt. A person anchored internally adapts. A person anchored externally fractures. The Stoics prepared for volatility by expecting it, not cynically, realistically. Seneca wrote that the wise person rehearses adversity not to suffer twice, but to suffer less. This rehearsal reduces shock. When difficulty arrives, it feels familiar. You have already imagined it, already accepted its possibility, already considered your response. This mental preparation does not make you cold. It makes you ready. Readiness replaces panic. Panic narrows thought. Readiness expands it. This readiness extends to mortality itself. The Stoics did not avoid the thought of death. They used it. Memento mori was not morbidity. It was prioritization. When you know time is finite, trivial concerns lose authority. You stop postponing what matters. You stop delaying integrity. You stop waiting to become who you already could be. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This is not despair. It is urgency without anxiety, urgency aligned with values. This awareness intensifies life. Moments become precise. Conversations become deliberate. Work becomes meaningful. Gratitude becomes grounded. You stop living as if time is guaranteed. And because of that, you start living well. The Stoics did not seek happiness as an emotional state. They sought tranquility as a condition of order. A life without internal contradiction. A life where your actions do not betray your values. A life where you are not constantly at war with yourself. This is the Stoic promise. Not pleasure, not success. Integrity. Integrity produces peace. Peace produces strength. Strength produces influence. Quiet influence. The kind that does not demand attention. The kind that earns respect. People sense when someone is governed internally. They trust them. They rely on them. They follow them. Not because they are loud, but because they are steady. This is Stoic leadership. Leadership of the self first. Everything else follows. And now the responsibility shifts, because philosophy does not complete itself. It waits. It waits for practice. Understanding these ideas is not the same as living them. Wisdom unused becomes intellectual decoration. Wisdom practiced becomes structure. It changes how you breathe under pressure, how you pause before reacting, how you speak when silence would be easier, how you choose when impulse tempts. If something in this resonated with you, it is likely not because it was new. It is because it articulated something you already sensed. That strength is quiet. That discipline is freedom. That character outlasts circumstance. If you value spaces where ideas are treated seriously, not reduced to slogans, not rushed for clicks, staying connected is a way of supporting that standard, not out of habit, out of alignment. If you believe depth still deserves attention, a simple gesture of support helps this kind of work continue in an environment that rarely rewards it. And if there is one person in your life, a friend, a colleague, someone thoughtful, who would genuinely appreciate reflecting on these ideas with you, consider sharing this with them, not to persuade, to think together. Finally, if you choose to leave a comment, let it be a contribution rather than applause, a question, a challenge, an insight this stirred. The Stoics value dialogue because dialogue refines judgment, and judgment refined is the foundation of a life well lived. Thank you for your attention. Remember, you do not control how long you live, but you do control how well, and that choice is always available.